The Exorcist Believer is the latest installment in what is now an iconic horror franchise, firmly entrenched in popular culture, having inspired countless derivative works and become a staple of horror parodies, as can be seen in Scary Movie 2 and Repossessed, a Leslie Nielsen comedy which unbelievably co-stars Linda Blair herself. I have not seen that, by the way, but I would like to at some point. Put that in the marathon.
Yeah, it deserved mention.
There hasn't been a new Exorcist movie in over a decade and a half. There was a short-lived television series in 2016. That show never really took off. It was probably only a matter of time before another movie did show up. This one starts fresh with a completely new set of characters. We're introduced to Victor, played by Leslie Odom Jr., vacationing with his pregnant wife in Haiti. There's an earthquake. She's critically injured. The doctors force Victor to choose between saving his baby or his wife. So then we cut 13 years later. He's living as a single father with his daughter, Angela, played by Lydia Jouet.
I think so. Yeah, I think that's it.
In a small town in Georgia. One day, Angela and another neighborhood girl go missing, turning up 3 days later with burns on their feet and no memory of where they've been or how long they've been gone. As you can expect, creepy things start to happen, symptoms and events with no medical or scientific explanation, leading Victor and his neighbors to the conclusion that their girls have been possessed by a demon. They seek the help of a familiar expert and go about planning an exorcism. I like how he wrote that. Like, ooh, I wonder who that could be. The movie was directed by David Gordon Green, who recently made the Halloween reboot trilogy, and Believer is apparently the planned first entry in a proposed trilogy. Already, I think this movie, from what I've been seeing, is fairly divisive, just as David Gordon Green's Halloween movies have been divisive.
I have been seeing some of the reviews, and yeah, they've been pretty negative from what I've seen. But I've got to say, I actually really disagree with the consensus on this one. I thought this was a good movie. I thought it had a good story. It got me involved. It was well told, very well made. Thought it was spooky. I have some reservations, which we'll get into, but overall, I felt it was a very effective movie. I've always thought David Gordon Green was a very talented director. I think he often gets underestimated because he does so many different kinds of movies. He does dramas, he does comedies, he does character studies, thrillers. Now he's doing horror. I've been watching his work for a long time, and I really think he's one of the best directors currently working. He's a superb craftsman. He's excellent with actors. He always gets naturalistic performances. He's something of a genius with casting. His movies always feature a mixture of professional and non-professional actors. Sometimes he uses real people, and he always finds the right person for each role. I want to mention his film Joe, which I think is an excellent movie. Very underseen, very underrated. In that one, he cast professional actors like Nicolas Cage and Ty Sheridan, who were both great. But he also casts people like Gary Poulter, who was a homeless man and a street performer with no previous acting experience in movies. He's unbelievable in Joe. That's an amazing one-off performance in that movie. And I believe in Believer, The Exorcist Believer, I think every actor is a professional for the most part, but Green seems to have chosen mostly faces for this one that aren't too familiar. And I think he does that so that this sense of community and the setting that he creates on screen can feel more real. And I think he does that very well. I felt like this movie did a great job convincing me that I was in a real place with real people, which is an essential element if you want to get those supernatural elements working the way they're supposed to. So I was very impressed by his work here.
I am in agreement with the first half. I try not to read reviews before I see a movie, but when it's a big movie that's getting a lot of buzz, things are going to come across your daily news feed, and I was aware that this was getting a bad reputation online. I think because it was really riding off the wave of negativity off of the last few Halloween movies, which that's a whole nother can of worms I won't open there. But many people didn't really care for the last where he took the Halloween franchise. So there was kind of already a built-in, I think,
like a hostility.
Hostility with the approaching release of this movie. I went in open-minded, but I was kind of like, all right, I won't set my expectations too high. And then the first hour of the movie, I was quite impressed. I thought it was very well done in terms of the characterizations. It was engaging on a human level, and in the way that the first one was, without it feeling too derivative. It does replicate some things. There's a similar kind of like single parent dynamic between the father this time and his daughter, but I think it's not as squeaky clean a relationship as we had seen in the first film. I think there's a little bit more resentment and complication here, given that the circumstances around the mother's death are quite complicated and still very painful for both the father and the mother, or the father and the daughter. That really gave it a different angle to explore and get lost in prior to anything supernatural happening, and it succeeded at that. I was getting invested in their dynamic and how they have a good relationship, but you can tell there's some things strained based on this loss that they've both suffered, and also the fact that they are in Georgia, a pretty religious community, and they're basically religiously agnostic. They're not necessarily non-believers, but they're like, it's not really a factor in their life. And that is something I feel like was kind of interesting to sort of otherize them further. The fact that they are, suffering this loss, but then they also don't really fit into this community that they lived into, because everyone kind of gives them that sort of stink eye of like, you're not really like us. And so that rift was kind of interesting too. The fact that they're a good family, but they're kind of facing all of these more societal problems that are brought about within their community. And I mean, you could probably even read in some racist themes, because it's probably by no coincidence that it focuses in on an African-American family within a primarily white neighborhood. So that definitely is a factor as well. That extended to the initial mystery of the girls getting lost in the woods and coming back, and it's left somewhat vague as to what happened in the woods, and they're trying to figure it out, and the girls come back very different after this incident occurs of them getting lost in the woods for 3 days. Really liked all that, and then it lost me when it started becoming an Exorcist movie. It was as soon as the legacy characters started coming in, as soon as the mythologizing of bringing it into familiar territory of the process of the exorcism and that whole ritual, and then basically I felt the ending was kind of an attempt to top what the original had done. It started to lose me in the way that I kind of complained modestly about Exorcist 3 kind of going down a similar path, but I really appreciated Exorcist 3 nonetheless after it was over. I think the ending of this one left sort of a bad taste in my mouth. I was kind of left like, I wasn't enticed enough by that, with things I did enjoy, to really feel excited about future sequels in this proposed franchise. I didn't hate it. Yeah. I definitely am not in the crowd of just completely dumping on this and saying it's worthless. I think there's a lot of really good things in this, but I do feel that it is more or less a pretty conventional franchise film that tries to give people what they want and just kind of pales in comparison compared to what we've seen before.
My reaction was fairly similar. I do think this movie has a lot of strengths. It does create a very palpable sense of place, and that's something Green has a real gift for. He makes the Georgia setting feel very well observed. He populates it and textures it with all these different kinds of people distinct from one another. Nobody looks out of place. It's not too self-consciously folksy, which movies can often run into that territory. Even just little one-scene characters, like when they're looking for the girls towards the beginning and they talk to some guys, who have been living in the woods. Like, even those little one-scene characters like that feel totally convincing. Like, they belong there. They don't feel like actors. They feel like people you would actually find there. That's an important element because the movie, sort of like Green's Halloween trilogy, is about community. Like the other films in the series, the Exorcist films, it's about faith, but that is reinterpreted here to be, instead of faith in a specific religion, to be faith in the people around you, a neighborhood, a community, and it's about faith as a system for trust and collaboration. So I actually liked how that pay off, like what you said, how you get the sense that Victor and his daughter are not really a part of that community at the beginning, and they have to learn to band together with everyone around them in order to face this situation. I actually enjoyed that. I enjoyed the way that was structured and the way that paid off. And I enjoyed how every character does feel like a real person and not just a plot contrivance. There are some characters here that I think could have easily come off as caricatures, like the Baptist parents. Their daughter is the other girl that gets possessed in the story, and there are so many ways they could have come off as one-dimensional if they'd been handled improperly. But Green, he has a feel for Southern families and Southern communities in particular. He grew up in Texas, so I think he has an understanding of people like this, and he's able to create a feeling of reality there. And yeah, like you said, all the characters have their flaws. Even Victor, the main character, I mean, yeah, he doesn't do such a good job of masking his hostility to the Baptist parents. That's a hostility that goes both ways. You get the sense that the Baptist parents are looking down on him for his lack of faith, and there is definitely a racist subtext there that you can feel. And you can also feel how he's looking down on them because he doesn't really respect their beliefs. But that conflict, that division, that's very well handled. It's subtle, it's nuanced, it doesn't hit any point right on the head. We're allowed to figure out what's going on there without ever over explaining it. So there's smart stuff like that in this movie.
As are typical of horror movies as of late, there's just kind of cheap jump scares scattered throughout.
Yeah.
That feel like, okay, that's there because everybody else is doing it. And I will say there is a scene that is lacking jump scares that I thought was very, very creepy and very well done. It was after the girls have disappeared in the woods and they come back, and they're noticeably different. They're not possessed, in the way that we know Reagan to be possessed, in the first film. They're just kind of very withdrawn and quiet, and they're just non-reactive. We don't really know what's happened to them exactly. I mean, we can gather that they're possessed, but I mean, like,
it is called The Exorcist.
Yeah, but I mean, it's done it starts very, very small and subtle, and they're just kind of totally withdrawn from the world. And there's a really great sequence where we just see the family at home, the Fielding family, that's their name. So we see the Fielding family at home, and like the dad is brushing his teeth. The lights are flicking on and off, and then he looks and he sees his daughter there is like flicking the lights on and off, and he's like, "Hey, is everything okay?" And she doesn't really react and asks her, "Okay, why don't you go to bed? It's late." And then we see her walk down the hallway, and then the camera kind of pans back to him brushing his teeth, and then the lights keep flicking on and off after we've just seen her walk down the hall. And
of course, by this point, we're waiting for something to happen.
Yeah, and so I was just like, I was starting to get tense of like, okay, like something scary is going to happen here, something's going to pop out. But then this back and forth kind of just keeps continuing, of the lights going on and off, of his daughter returning to the bathroom and just kind of standing there quietly, and then the shot just kind of keeps continuing in this long take of this sort of strange behavior. I thought that was very unsettling, and I liked that it didn't really pay off in a scare. It just made you feel very unsettled and disturbed by her behavior because it was so unnatural. I wish there was more of that in here. I think that was very promising, and that really was making me excited for what was to come. But I think what's to come is kind of more what you'd expect, like, when they're in psychiatric care and the doctor is explaining what's happening, and then we don't see her on the bed, but then she pops up in front of the glass. It's like, okay, that's what you'd expect. But there are moments in here that are very, very unsettling and very well played, and David Gordon Green shoots it in just an observant way that doesn't really get in the way of just what the situation is. That it would be disturbing to see a loved one act like this. Like, I also love the moment when when his daughter, wets the bed, and how the father reacts to that, of how he's not reactive, he's not like shocked or upset, he's just like, oh, okay, like, just go take a bath, I'll get this cleaned up. And you can tell he's just like so disturbed by that, but he's trying
he reacts like a parent.
That's a difficult thing for anybody, I think, to see a loved one just not be themselves. And so there was some really compelling stuff from that angle that I thought was really well done. But but then the exorcism happens, and then it's the Exorcists.
Yeah, I mean, it is, admittedly, it's a modern horror movie, so it needs the accoutrements of a modern horror movie. I didn't mind that as much as I thought I would. I was sort of okay with it, I think, because I was kind of expecting it. But where I did think the movie was the weakest, I think you brought this up before, was in the ways that it linked itself directly to the original. She's in the trailer, so I don't think it's a spoiler to bring this up. Ellen Burstyn does make an appearance as Chris MacNeil, which is welcome, because I like seeing Ellen Burstyn on screen. So it's cool. Like, oh, there she is. She's 90. She's still there. All right. And she's a great actress. She's good in the movie. But to me, like, very quickly, those scenes like started to feel like an intrusion. They started to feel like something from a totally different movie. And I kind of had to readjust to it. It's like, oh, okay, so she's fitting in here. And then I won't spoil what happens, but yeah, they kind of have to like put her aside, after she shows up. So it almost doesn't really feel like it's necessary at all. Again, I like seeing Ellen Burstyn, but I think you could have cut her out of the movie and it wouldn't have really impacted the film at all so much.
I felt the same way. I felt that in a very strange way, her scenes literally could be lifted out of the movie, and then you could just kind of compress everything down, and I don't think it would be a very different experience. It was curiously non-integrated, her role in the film, for being something that's so heavily marketed. It's very non-eventful what she ends up doing.
That's true, yeah.
But yeah, you're right. It's, of course, it's always great to see Ellen Burstyn in the movie. It's like, that's not the issue. It's just what you described. It's there's one kind of movie that you're watching and enjoying, and then she shows up and it becomes this other kind of movie, and it seems at odds with what we were seeing before. It kind of recovers thematically with some moments towards the end. Even preceding her actually showing up, I think I was kind of taken out of the movie when they start doing the whole mythologizing thing of after
the book. Yeah.
Exactly, because I that's one thing I don't get too upset about, like, betraying the integrity of the characters. Like, that stuff never really bothers me all that much. I'm okay with different interpretations of characters existing in different directors' movies, but I do find it a little annoying when a character's entire existence between the first movie and the current movie all revolves around things that we've only seen them do in that first movie. So Chris MacNeil's entire life revolves around everything we've seen her do in the first Exorcist. The exorcism of her daughter. Like, that's what she's dedicated her life to. And I'm like, that's... But I mean, she's a human being who's lived, 50 years between that time.
She was an actress. Has she done any other movies since then?
But they do this whole thing of like, oh, but she's the exorcism expert because she was the one that did the exorcism in the 70s. But she never really was supposed to be the expert. She was just somebody that this thing happened to happen to. And,
yeah, she's the only one in the movie that does feel like a plot contrivance.
Yeah, and so that really did honestly take me out of the movie when that whole sort of sequence began, and I could feel what it was doing, and I could feel how it was trying to get us excited about, oh, guess who's showing up now. It started to make me kind of make me remember that I was watching
the sixth movie in a franchise.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But all due respect to Ellen Burstyn, because the fact that she's in this and the fact that she's appearing in this, I think is kind of great. I think I love that she's allowing herself to come back to this franchise that she's so heavily associated with. And so like I said, she's not the problem. I love Ellen Burstyn. Yeah.
For connections to the original movie, I have to give this one credit because a lot of people are going after it for like the ways it tries to link itself or pay homage to the original and saying it's so obvious, et cetera, et cetera. But I think there are actually ways unacknowledged so far in which it tries to mirror the original in a lot of its structure and in a lot of its plot details that I would say are actually very clever and very well done. Like the opening, setting the whole opening in Haiti and having that be pretty much its own standalone sequence. I thought that was in a way kind of doing its own version of the opening in Iraq in the original. So I enjoyed that. And it also serves a dual purpose for setting up major things that will later be used against Victor during the final exorcism, which I don't want to reveal, but I thought that moment, that reveal of something that actually happened at the beginning was very well done. That took me by surprise. There's also a very effective scene of medical invasiveness. That's actually one of the hardest scenes to watch in the original when they're performing these medical procedures on Regan. Green does his own version of that here when the girls are being examined by doctors after they've gone missing. That's another good example of the movie referencing, paying homage to the original, but doing its own thing with it and not being so obvious about it that we're sitting there rolling our eyes. And that's when the movie is at its best, when it's doing its own thing. And just to wrap up, I'll say I kind of felt much the same way as I did coming out of this one as I did when I was coming out of Green's first Halloween movie. You know, I was thinking, wow, that was much better than I was expecting. That was almost better than it had any right to be, as the umpteenth sequel to a movie that I would say didn't really need any sequels in the first place. Coming out of this one, I was very satisfied, very impressed, and I didn't feel the need to see any more. I didn't see the other two films in the Halloween trilogy. I probably won't see the other films in this planned Exorcist trilogy if they happen. But I thought this first one, as its own film, was very good, much better than I would have expected. In spite of all the flaws, in spite of all the things where I was like, I don't know if that works. I think more works than doesn't here. It's smart, it's scary. I found it satisfying, and I thought Green put his strengths as a director on full display here. And if somebody were to ask me if it's worth watching, if it was a good horror movie for this season, I would say, yes, go see it. If you're expecting something revelatory that transcends the material, you're not going to get that. But you do get a good horror film with good drama at the center. And I was happy with that.
I agree that it's actually, I think it is a cut above what you typically see and what this could have been. But given the nature of what I think supporting it would invoke, it would just mean more David Gordon Green Exorcist movies. And I want David Gordon Green to keep working, so I want people to like support him, but I don't want him to keep doing Exorcist movies. So it's like, I'm a little conflicted about that.
I totally see what you mean. I am ready for him to do something else now.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want him to make like Hellraiser or something. I want him just to make like a David Gordon Green movie that's not a franchise movie.
Oh my God, if any horror franchise was in need of some kind of rescue, it's probably the Hellraiser series.
I heard that there was a new one of that. I think there's like
they're churning them out like clockwork, and I haven't seen them, so I don't know, but it does not look like they're putting much effort into them anymore.
Yeah, I mean, I only saw bits and pieces of like the found footage E1, but we're not talking about Hellraiser. We'll get to that some other time. I definitely want to push against all the negativity that the movie is getting, because it definitely deserves some praise in a lot of aspects. I really think it actually thematically takes the movie or the series in interesting directions that is current and relatable, like about modern day faith, about how I'd say the situation that the Fielding family is in of being sort of religiously agnostic, I think is honestly more relatable than the way the faith in the original films. It's just kind of taken for granted that everybody sort of has this belief, and that these things can really occur. I like that it is perhaps a little bit more relatable for people now, to kind of have people who are more skeptical, because I think it's something we haven't really seen before in this series, and I like that it explores faith on a personal level, but also on a community level, of that being something that can either unite people, bring them apart, or can be turned against you. Your faith can absolutely be used as a tool to manipulate you, and this movie explores that as well. With this being a series that's really rooted in belief and the nature of good and evil, I think it actually has unique takes on it. I think it takes it in directions that we haven't seen before in the series thus far. But that being said, I don't think it's what the movie's primary agenda really was. I think the primary agenda was to be a popular entertainment that is easily digestible with your popcorn. Whether it works on that level or not, I'm a little on the fence about that, to be honest.
I can understand.
My own taste, I thought it was better than I was absolutely expecting, and better than what people would make it out to be.